The forest was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm. It was 1901. Southeastern Nigeria. Arochukwu. British troops moved through the mist, their boots sinking into red earth, their rifles ready. But deep within the trees, unseen eyes watched. Warriors painted in sacred symbols, clutching machetes and charms. This was not just a clash of armies. This was a collision of worlds. One world carried the weight of empire, flags, muskets, and a hunger to rule. The other, an ancient network of oracles, traders, warriors, and priests, the Aro Confederacy. This is the story of how the Igbo faced the British Empire. This is the story of the Anglo-Aro War. This is Voices of the Forgotten. The Oracle's power. Long before the British came, there was Arochukwu, a sacred city hidden deep in the rainforest. And at its heart was Ibini Ukpabi, the long Juju oracle. People traveled for days, from villages, riversides, faraway markets, to kneel before this oracle. It judged. It punished. It protected. And the Aro priest who spoke it well. They became the architects of an invisible empire. Not by armies. Not by force. But by belief. The Aro Confederacy wasn't a kingdom. It was a web of alliances, trade routes, and spiritual fear. They traded palm oil, ivory, and yes, even slaves. But at the center of it all was control. And that control came from the oracle. The British didn't understand it. So they feared it. For nearly 2 centuries, the Aro dominated southeastern Nigeria. Through diplomacy, war, and fear, they expanded influence over dozens of clans, creating an empire without borders. Their strength came not from numbers, but from belief. And belief, as history has shown, can move mountains, or hold back empires. Smoke on the horizon. By the late 1800s, the British had made their intentions clear. They weren't here to trade. They were here to rule. The Royal Niger Company, a private corporation backed by the Crown, had begun expanding aggressively across the Niger Delta. With military force, they seized palm oil ports. They signed treaties, some coerced, others forged. British flags appeared on villages that had never seen a white man. But the Aro, they refused. Their oracle still decided major disputes. Their traders still rode key routes. Their warriors still marched in full regalia. To the British, the Aro were a threat to order. To the Aro, the British were invaders. British missionaries called the long Juju a tool of darkness. Colonial officers painted the Aro as corrupt overlords of a slave empire. London newspapers rallied the public, demanding action. And so, in quiet rooms in Calabar and Lagos, war was planned. It would be swift, they said. But they didn't understand who they were dealing with. If you've made it this far, you already see what they tried to erase. Hit that like button if you believe history matters. Type "we remember" in the comments if you were never taught this in school. And subscribe for more African stories that the world forgot. This is Voices of the Forgotten. Let's continue. The warpath. In 1899, a decision was made: the Aro Confederacy must fall. Governor Ralph Moore gave the green light for a full-scale military invasion. The objective: destroy the oracle, break the trade routes, shatter the Confederacy. The British assembled over 1,500 troops, including Hausa soldiers trained by the West African Frontier Force. They brought with them the Maxim gun, a new weapon of terrifying power. In Arochukwu, word spread like wildfire. The gods had warned of invasion. Priests offered sacrifices. Warriors from Ohafia, Abom, and other allied clans sharpened their weapons and prepared their charms. The forest prepared to defend itself. And then, in late November 1901, the march began. Fire in the forest. 3 British columns advanced from different directions: Oguta, Akwit, and Itu. They cut through jungle, crossed rivers, and burned villages. The Aro didn't meet them in open battle, not at first. They ambushed. They struck in the dark. They vanished into trees. But the British pressed on. Village after village fell. The British burned shrines, seized stores of palm oil, and cut down sacred trees. But the Aro refused to break. Until, finally, in December, they reached the heart, Arochukwu itself. The battle was brutal. The forest roared with gunfire. Drums of war clashed against Maxim guns. And then, the temple, the shrine of Ibini Ukpabi, was stormed. The oracle was destroyed. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashes and chains. The war was won on paper. But in reality, it had just begun. The British arrested dozens of Aro leaders. They installed warrant chiefs, handpicked men loyal to the crown. They demanded taxes on land, on labor, on life itself. Many villages rebelled in small ways. Hiding goods, defying orders, praying to forbidden spirits. But the system tightened. Missionaries flooded in. English replaced native tongues in some schools. Traditional gods were labeled devils. The Aro trade routes collapsed. The fear of the long Juju was gone. And with it, so was the invisible empire. Yet even in defeat, the spirit did not die. From the ashes of Arochukwu rose a deeper flame, one that would burn quietly for decades. The flame of memory. Buried, but not forgotten. Today, the Anglo-Aro War is almost unknown. You won't find it in most textbooks. It's not taught in schools across Nigeria, let alone the world. But listen. Listen in the homes of elders in Abo. Listen to the folk songs of Ohefia. Listen to the silence in Arochukwu's forest. It's still there. A people who stood against empire and paid dearly. They were not perfect. They were not invincible. But they were proud. And they chose to resist. This war was not just about territory. It was about identity. About dignity. About memory. And that's what they tried to erase. But we are here. And we remember. If this story moved you, don't let it disappear again. Like this video to help it spread. Comment, we remember Arochukwu. Share it with one person, 10 people, or your whole timeline. And most importantly, subscribe. Because this is Voices of the Forgotten. Where the past lives. Where Africa speaks. And where history